If you've been in the photography world for any length of time, you've probably seen or heard something along the lines of bokeh doesn't necessarily make a good photo. Now, why or why doesn't bokeh automatically make a photo good? To think through this, I'm gonna use one of my own photos from a recent trip I went on in New York City. I really like this picture. I was super excited when I looked at my camera and saw it, but I think it's the perfect picture to help us think through why bokeh may not necessarily make a good photo. So first off, what is bokeh? Now, if you're here and you've clicked on this video, you probably know what bokeh is, but in case you don't, it's what you get when you use a really wide aperture or a very fast lens. You get a very soft, blurred, out of focus background, like you can see in some of these photos. I also think it would be helpful to sort of tell you what I mean when I say good photo. When I'm saying a photo is a good photo, I am saying that it carries a little bit of weight. It tells you about something. It doesn't have to do much, but it just has to stand on its own in some capacity. Everyone loves bokeh. For the longest time when I had first started photography, learning how to get that effect in my photos was my ultimate goal. Buying a low f-stop, very shallow depth of field lens was my highest crowning achievement as a photographer, because it gives your photos these beautifully soft, out of focus, blurred backgrounds. People love bokeh, and I think that can be clearly seen based on thousands of Instagram photos of ultimately nothing, but it has a pretty background. So I'm not going to critique somebody else's photo for this video. I'm only going to stick to my own when it comes to thinking through whether or not it's a good photo, because my photos are the only ones I ultimately have claim to. I can't decide how other people make pictures. So if we look at this taxi photo, this is very pretty. There's a lot of bright colors going on. There's some good reflections, some good bokeh, as you can see, coming from the lights in the background. And I was super excited to get it. I ran out into the middle of the street behind a taxi to try and get this photo. I had seen it in my head. I knew exactly what I was getting. When I clicked the shutter, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was really excited when I got it. But I want to ask the question, does this photo help tell any kind of story? Now, in the context of me taking it, I was walking with my wife down the sidewalk. I saw the taxi. We had just walked away from the direction of the background, so I knew all those lights were going to be in the background. So I knew exactly what I was getting when I took that photo. But when it comes to being anything more than a pretty picture, I don't know that it is. It might help frame the location. I'm in New York, it's a yellow cab, it's a big city, there's a lot of bright lights. Could help do that, potentially, yeah, and I think it does do that. But I don't think this photo carries any particular weight on its own. I think in a set of 8 or 9 other photos, all sort of detailing New York in different ways, wide angles, close-up shots, people, buildings, that kind of thing, showing off what it's like to be in New York, this photo could do very well helping to tell that story. And I have plenty of other photos like this, photos that I took knowing the star of the show was the bokeh. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just don't think that your primary goal should be achieving bokeh in a photo. I think that bokeh is an extremely useful artistic tool. It can create a really beautiful photo, but it needs to be used in conjunction with other things, with a focus on storytelling, a focus on place or person. I think to focus on bokeh on its own, it doesn't necessarily make it a good photo. So when thinking about this, whether or not bokeh necessarily makes a photo good, I don't think it is a pro versus con of bokeh in that sense. I think the most helpful way to think about it is going to be that bokeh is a tool. It is another piece of your kit as a photographer. It's another little piece of information you've got in your brain that you can use to help you create good photos. Just like the rule of thirds, leading lines, noise in photos, where your focus is, things like that, those are all tools to help you create the photo that you see in your head. Bokeh should be thought of just the same. You don't use those every time, because if you did, it would be mundane and redundant, and it would probably get in the way of telling the story rather than helping it. With all this said about bokeh, I want to remind you that I'm a photographer just like anybody else, and I love a good bokeh photo. This taxi photo is a prime example of that. I knew exactly what I was going after with the photo, and I didn't care because it was gonna be a banger. So with all this said, I still encourage you, go out, take banging bokeh photos because everybody loves them. They're never going out of style. They're always gonna be cool. But keep it in the back of your mind that if that's all you're doing, it might be hindering you rather than helping you. If I taught you something new or explained something you thought you knew, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'd love to help if I can. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you later.